didn't need to provide an accounting for every single item and every single amount of money that was donated. Okay. That, hi, Shiva. It's Moshe. We know that the Jewish people and Moshe had their rough days, but was it ever because they didn't trust him? They thought he was pocketing money. That seems, of all the things, that seems like a very strange accusation for Moshe. In fact, Hashem himself says about Moshe, B'chol beiti ne'emanhu. He's the most trustworthy human being, right? He was the most humble, but also the most trustworthy. I think those two things have a lot to do with each other, right? He never thinks that he's supposed to be something that he's not. And therefore he doesn't need to prove that he has, that has a little extra padded income or anything like that. He just knows that he's in this world to fulfill the mission that Hashem gave him. And so he's not going to take from anybody else because that's not what Hashem wants him to have, right? It's a very simplistic way of understanding why a person really who has bitachon, who has faith in God, is never going to cheat. They're never going to not pay for, the full price for something or play around with their taxes in a way that's illegal. I know we're all supposed to find loopholes, but I mean the illegal ones, the unethical ones. And this is really just on the surface level, this is just to let us know that there is no such thing as a human being that's above the law, right? And it's just because Moshe was the most trustworthy and Hashem himself testifies to that, does not mean that people don't sometimes make mistakes or take advantage of situations. Even a Moshe, who that is the farthest thing from our minds that he would be tempted to take money. In fact, we actually see that he tells the people, okay, wait, you brought too much. Nobody bring any more. That is a statement only made by somebody who's not planning on pocketing what comes in that's extra. Otherwise, he'd be like, keep it coming, keep it coming. So it's clear he's not taking. And even with that, the Torah is really giving us guidelines for the way we should be going forward, the way we hold ourselves, both in our dealings with each other, in our businesses, and the way we deal with the government and all of those things. You can be an upright person, and that doesn't mean that you still don't have to show an accounting for where all of the money went. My husband mentioned to me, I didn't get to log on when he spoke about the situation in Ukraine. Has anyone else found themselves, I always called it the Ukraine, and really you're supposed to call it Ukraine. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't think not
not
the
the.
Ukraine, just plain old.
Okay. So we always called it the Ukraine. I don't know why. Not that it came up so often, but that's where my family's from. My grandmother's from Kiev and, that,
wow.
and it was always, she was from the Ukraine, but I see in media and everything that it's Ukraine. Okay. So I'm the only one who made the mistake. It's okay. I just figured I'd share my new wisdom.
Are Kiev and Kyiv the same thing?
It's the same thing.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
They changed the spelling. It's like all the cities that we all know about because we either have ancestors who are from there. I mean, for me, it's just my grandmother. It wasn't far back. But a lot of us are familiar with Odessa and Kharkov. I mean, Kharkov is a place that students for Soviet Jewry used to go all the time because it's a huge Jewish community and they spell it with an I, like Kharkiv, but we always pronounced it Kharkov. So it's all the same cities. They're just these are the more modernized, now that Ukraine is its own country. I don't know, I remember when it was just part of Russia, it was just part of the Soviet Union. So yeah, I mean, without getting into the craziness that is current events right now and the horrific pain of the whole situation. But my husband mentioned to me that he said on Monday night that when it comes to people deciding who should I give tzedakah to and how should I do it? He said it's good to know where your money is going. It's good to check that things are on the up and up and that your money is going to the right place 100%. But in situations like this, I was just laughing because I can't remember what I told him I spent money on something, which of course reminded him, oh, hey, since you could spend a couple $100s on this without thinking about it, that means you should be making donations without thinking about it, right? That same amount of money that is clearly in your realm, and for everyone it's different, obviously, but if that's your flexible spending, then you don't need to be, as we say, latet din v'cheshbon. You don't need to be but their overhead is like this, and it's 2% here and 1% here, okay. So with the exception of situations that are hatzalas nefashos, pikuach nefesh, where we know we are saving human lives, which I just, when was the last time we had an opportunity to be involved in a mitzvah like that? We're not talking about yes, food and clothing, and there have been other disasters that we've all seen recently and not so recently where we have had but this is literally bribing the guards to save human beings. And that is just, I cannot believe that we are living through all of this. That being said, when it comes to Pikadon, when it comes to giving accounting in general, it's something we should all be prepared to do. It's something we know we're prepared to do in the world to come. After, God willing, 120 years, we're told that a person is going to latate din v'cheshbon. They're going to have to make an accounting for everything they did. And that is not clearly just referring to finances, but it certainly includes finances. So it's just, I think, a really down-to-earth, realistic reminder that everybody needs to recognize that none of us, we don't get to cut corners, and we don't get to skip the rules. What I actually really wanted to focus on, though, today is not so much the accounting, although it's a fascinating, you could do the math. It's like a great activity. You could add up the amount of money that was collected and then figure out how much was accounted for. And then the Medrash tells us there's an amount that's missing. And that amount that was missing, Moshe couldn't find it. And the Medrash tells a great story about how Hashem opens up his eyes and he realizes that that amount of money, I think was 1,775 shekel, was missing. And it was missing because Moshe forgot that he had stuck it in the hooks that attached some of the curtains to some of the boards, I think, of the Mishkan. And so it wasn't easily seen. And there's a whole lesson there, but not for now. What I wanted to actually focus on was a very interesting, it's a short little phrase that's in this week's Parsha, but it comes at the end of the phrase that is mentioned many, many times. This is where I feel bad that can I share my screen? No, I can't share my screen, but that's okay. You're all going to trust me because I'm going to make an honest reckoning of all of my accounts here. So throughout this week's Parsha, and really already last week's Parsha, where we had seen that the Jewish people and Moshe were putting into place all the things Hashem had commanded them to, right? All of the different aspects, all the different vessels, and all of the construction of the Mishkan itself, the boards and the planks and the rods and all of those things. We got the commandment. And then last week and this week, we're being told how they actually made everything. Not the details of how it was made, but that they made everything, including the clothing of Aharon and his children, which was its own separate category, but obviously related. And that is also painstakingly detailed. Like you could have just said, they did everything they were told to do. But we know that if the Torah took all this time to do it, then there's got to be a reason. And it's not just that. What I found so fascinating is that I lost count of the number of times it says throughout this week's Parsha, Kechol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe, kain asu. Or, everything that Hashem commanded Moshe, the Jewish people did. I'm scrolling through, I see it 4 times, and I've literally just scrolled once. After almost every category of construction or the clothing design, it said that phrase is repeated over and over again. And the commentaries point out this is, and Rav Hirsch, I think in particular makes this point, that it has to be repeated over and over again, because when a human being is given an assignment, never mind if it's, an assignment that requires creativity, but any assignment where a person is told to do something, follow a recipe or, directions on how to get somewhere. Anytime you're given an assignment, the likelihood is that the person is going to leave their own imprint on the assignment. So, if you're like me, you're always following the directions. I'm not changing. I'm doing everything you tell me. But when it comes to recipes, I'm not so good about measuring. And I'm like, oh, why is there no salt in this recipe? Right? Or like, what, 1 teaspoon of vanilla? Now I'll just pour until the bottle's empty or whatever. And it's not because we think we're like, at least in my case, it's not because I'm such a great baker or such a great chef. It's just like, no, I think I'm going to like it better like this. Like it's my own, this is how I make it a little bit mine. I'm following the recipe that everybody else uses from the same cookbook that everyone else is using. But there's this natural human tendency to want to leave my own mark on something, to say like, well, here's the recipe, but like I did it a little bit like this. Like, I don't know, it's the human tendency. And what's so remarkable, Rav Hirsch says, is that here you have a group of people, and I don't know if this is heightened by the fact that they were slaves and this is their first big project, or if inherently they were very creative people who had never had an opportunity to express their creativity. I think you could look at it both ways. Either way, it is astonishing that they do not do anything that shows their own personal expression. like if you think about what kind of self-control that must have taken, like I know Hashem said I'm supposed to do it this way, but it looks so good if I just like curve the edge a little bit, right? Or wouldn't it be, I mean, he said this should be made out of gold, but like, I really feel like copper would look better here, or whatever, the design. We have spoken, in past weeks about the detail of the weaving and the mixing of materials and everything that was done. There was really a lot of steps. There's like a lot of little bit of salt that could have been added to this recipe. And Rav Hirsch says the reason why the Torah points it out over and over again is because it's really, they had to go against human nature to really make sure that this was what Hashem wanted. And obviously that's not just a statement about their ability to control themselves. It's a statement about what it means when Hashem tells us to do something and we essentially turn our will into his will, or we make his will our will, however you want to say it. That of course we're human beings, and we could very easily make the argument, but he gave me a neshama and he made me creative and he gave me this instinct to want to do certain things. So he understands, right? That's like an argument we could often make to ourselves when it comes to any mitzvah or any area of Jewish law that is a bit more challenging. And I have said this to myself and I've heard other people say it countless times, but like Hashem knows me and he knows what I'm good at and what I'm not so good at. He knows what my challenges are. He couldn't possibly expect me to do this. Like he knows where I'm coming from. And that may be true. But like, that's really up to him and us, right? We're supposed to try and do our best. And what this is telling us is they were successful in not just holding themselves back, but in really giving over their whole creative energy, like all of their inspiration over to Hashem. And in particular, I think in the area of inspiration, we all have our things that like speak to us more. And we're supposed to find those channels that bring us more connection, more spiritual energy, whatever you want to call it. But we also know that Hashem gave us what we call the Daled Amos of Halacha, the 4 cubits of Jewish law. And it's really within that box. Okay, the box we could push out a little on the side, but in general, that's where we're supposed to find our inspiration and find what's meaningful to us. And how amazing that of all of the workmen, of all of the people who were involved in the Mishkan, that none of them put like, if you look carefully, you'll see someone's signature, like you'll go off into a museum and they'll tell you like, well, if you look this way, you'll see that there's, the artist put their name in the flower, or there's an allusion to his children because he put so-and-so like facing this way. And it's a ton of self-control. It's not like they would have, I guess they could easily have said, no one's going to notice. It's a little funny because Hashem's the boss. So like probably he would have noticed, but we tell ourselves that all the time. We tell ourselves that all the time. So it's really, and it's a collective thing. It's not just as individuals. And maybe they had to cheer each other on and be like, no, resist temptation. I don't know what it took for them to be able to do that. I think Rav Hirsch makes a beautiful point that there's a reason why the Torah keeps repeating that phrase. It's not normal what they did. We've spoken about it's not normal that they were able to become so creative and so talented and so skilled in very refined crafts, like things they should not have ever been able to do. And we spoke about how really that was because they wanted it so badly that Hashem gave them this extra measure of wisdom. They were able to do these things. But it's not just that. It's that they didn't get caught up in the fact that this was them. They saw themselves completely as messengers of Hashem, agents of Hashem, and therefore were able to subdue any personal interest or any personal investment that they may have had. So I think that's just an amazing concept and something to keep in mind. In particular, when it comes to the Mishkan, it seems like this would be a very appropriate thing to do. Like this is the place where Hashem said, I'm planning to meet you here and you should build it to my specifications. And one of the things that I think really comes out is the idea that the Mishkan, according to many approaches, was a way for the Jewish people to confirm that their relationship with Hashem had been healed from the sin of the golden calf, right? One approach is we were always supposed to have a Mishkan, and one approach is no, we were not always supposed to have a physical place to worship God. Who needs that? It's only because we showed that we needed something physical, and Hashem needed to give us an opportunity to worship him in a way that would work for us and would show that we could follow the rules when he sets them, that he gave us a Mishkan. And that added piece is really very meaningful when you think about the fact that the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf, came as an outgrowth of the Jewish people wanting to sort of put their own stamp on whatever you want to call it, spirituality, religiosity, expression. That was like they needed something. They needed to create something of their own to come up with something new and exciting because they were missing whatever they had had before. And this is sort of the Mishkan and all of its details and all of its laws and all of its strict measurements is here to also make sure that the Jewish people are getting that message. Like, it's good to be excited and invested and enthusiastic, but it's got to be according to Hashem's rule. So that also fits very nicely. It also fits with the idea that the word Mishkan is related to the word mashkon. And I'm blanking right now on the word collateral. That's the English word. Okay. Like cooperation. No, that's not it. Okay. A mashkon is in like interpersonal law and business law is if, we make a deal, then you're going to hold on to my pen because in case I don't pay you back, you'll have this, right? I mean, that's something that I think exists in all financial situations. So Chazal, our sages, understand that it's not just called the Mishkan because that's where Hashem's Shechina is going to reside, right? Because L'shakein means to reside. The Shechina is Hashem's presence, and the Mishkan is where that's going to rest. So all those things are connected to reside, Hashem's presence, and the tabernacle itself. That's all the same word, but they add an additional understanding, which comes from the fact that a mashkon is a collateral. And what they said is, if you want to understand why the Mishkan, we all think of it as like, oh, you hear angels singing, like the way we picture the Beis Hamikdash, God willing, that we'll have speedily in our day. But we picture like everything's going to be perfect and the sky will always be blue and the sun, there'll be no clouds, the sun will shine, we'll hear angels singing, we'll never do anything wrong. Probably not what it's going to be like, but it's a nice image to hold in our minds. So they explain, yeah, it's true. The Mishkan was going to be this place of beautiful inspiration, but you know what it really was? It really proved to be throughout our history collateral, because we know that as the Jewish people are people, and we have made mistakes in our history, that the only reason, say the sages, that the Jewish people still exist is because when we have made our most serious mistakes, when we have sinned the most hatefully and most difficultly, Hashem, rather than taking out the consequences, the punishments, his anger, so to speak, on us as people, he's had a place that he could take it out on. What Chazal call eitzim va'avanim, like wood and stone, right? Better than Hashem should take out his anger on a place than on the people. And that idea, which is really the only reason that we're still here, because Chazal are very clear, had there not been a Beit HaMikdash, we never would have survived the first destruction. The sins of the Jewish people, both in the first and the second, were so bad, so devastating, showed such a sign of separation from Hashem that none of us should have lived to tell the tale. But because there was this collateral, right, even though it's the Beit HaMikdash, not the Mishkan, but our Mishkan that we're studying now was really the paradigm for that idea, that if and when the Jewish people should sin and should make a mistake, this is Hashem's way of saying, like, no matter what, I got your back. We have this special place. It's your and my special place. Like nobody else is ever welcome to be there. It's just for you and me. And we can dream of the time, like I said, that we'll be able to have to reunite with Hashem in the built up version of that place. And it's horrific to imagine the destruction. But really the tragedy of the destruction of both Batei Mikdash and of the Mishkan itself, eventually the Mishkan prior to the temples, was the destruction that happened to the people, right? A building at the end of the day is a building. Right? We all know this. We know somebody recently who, unfortunately they had a fire in their house, and there is nothing like that will just, as traumatic as it is, and it is traumatic and it is a loss. There is nothing like that kind of brings home the point when you've walked out with yourself intact and your health intact, that you say to yourself, like, this is a terrible situation and we're also healthy and alive. And that is really meant to be our approach when we think about the loss of the Beit HaMikdash and eventually the loss of the Mishkan, is that it was just a building. And what really matters is the people. And where I saw this point brought out the most beautifully is in this phrase that I mentioned to you, which repeats itself over and over again. So at the end of Perek Lamed Tet, so towards the end of the Parsha, Again, it says, I think it's the sixth time, but I lost count. Kechol asher tziva Hashem et Moshe, just like Hashem commanded Moshe, kein asu b'nei Yisrael et kol avodah. So too, the Jewish people did everything Hashem told Moshe. This I actually saw from, I can't remember where, maybe it was the Sfas Emes. No, I was Rav Gifter. Rav Gifter, who said that this is our proof that we need, that everything that Hashem told Moshe and passed on to the Jewish people was exactly as it was supposed to be. The Mishkan was like a carrying, living proof of the existence of the chain of Masorah, of tradition. Because just like we needed something to be able to show for it. Like today we say like, oh, look, our tefillin looks just like the tefillin did from so long ago. So that's our proof that it's not written anywhere what it's supposed to look like in the Torah, but tefillins always look the same. So that's our proof. Well, in these days, the Mishkan was the proof for the Jewish people when they knew that they had done everything right. It was like a stamp of approval that everything Hashem told Moshe, Moshe told the Jewish people. And for us, that's like a nice added, okay, maybe hopefully we don't need proof all the time, but it's nice to have this sense like, wow, yeah, this is real. Like it's really been passed down from generation to generation without the changes that normally happen when, I tell you something and you tell you something and you tell you, like without the broken telephone, this is real. The last pasuk after the pasuk I just read about how the Jewish people did everything Hashem told Moshe, the last pasuk Mem Gimel says, Vayar Moshe et kol hamlacha. Now Moshe is surveying the situation and he sees all of the work, v'hinei asu ota, and he sees that they did it. Again, the constant mention of them and they and Bnei Yisrael is really a testament to the fact that the whole Jewish people is giving credit for the construction of the Mishkan, even though it was a handful of people that were involved in the hands-on activities. But if you made a donation or if you got your hands dirty or if you, ran the errands or did the shopping or were the actual craftsmen, the whole Jewish people was given the same credit, which is an important lesson for all of us. V'hinei asu ota, they did it, kasher tziva Hashem. Moshe is looking at this and he's thinking to himself, like what we had said before, holy cow, this is exactly what Hashem said. Nobody changed anything. Like all the boards match up exactly. It's perfect. This is exactly what Hashem had commanded. Kein asu, they did it all. And then it ends with the following phrase, and this is what I want to speak about for the last few minutes. Vayivarech otam Moshe. And Moshe gave them a bracha. So we know that Moshe shares things with the Jewish people, right? The whole really last book of the Torah is Moshe talking to the Jewish people, sharing things with them, giving them bracha, also giving them, his 2 cents about what he thinks about some of their decisions and their behavior. But we know, right? Hazinu, like these are songs of bracha to the Jewish people. He blesses each tribe. There's a lot of bracha that happens. There was something about this that I thought like, what's happening? Like he's blessing the people. So Rashi has a very famous comment here that tells us exactly what the bracha was. Like, what did he say? The Torah doesn't give us a text. So he says, Amar lahem, he said to them, Yihi ratzon shetishre shchina b'ma'aseh yedechem. Right? May it be his will that his shchina, God's presence, should reside amongst the accomplishments of your hands. Like it should rest on your handiwork. And then Rashi continues, but that's not all he said. He also, this is where he composed the parak of Tehillim, parak Tzadi, where at the very end, it's where it begins Tefillah LaMoshe Isha Elokim, right? It's a prayer written by Moshe. The last pasuk there is a pasuk that you're probably familiar with. Vihi Noam Hashem Elokeinu Aleinu, U'Maaseh Yadeinu Konana Aleinu, U'Maaseh Yadeinu Konanehu. I actually had it pulled up here, just make sure. Yeah. Wanted to make sure I read it correctly. That's how he concluded his bracha to the Jewish people. And then Rashi says Vigomer, meaning like he probably said the whole parak of Tehillim, but this was the bracha that Hashem gave to the Jewish people. And it's a beautiful text to study. It's a beautiful parak to study. But I thought this was really a way that we can see how all of these ideas come together that we talked about before. The idea that Moshe, when he blesses the Jewish people, he blesses the Jewish people. Right? He doesn't bless Vayivarech otam Moshe. He blesses the people. He doesn't look at the final product and focus on the Mishkan itself, right? Which at this point also wasn't constructed, and he was going to have to be the one to put it together. And that's a whole other. That's what happens in the coming Sefer Vayikra, the whole process, the 7 days and putting it up and taking it down and all of that. But you would think he'd be obsessed with the finished product. You would think he would look at it and be like, using all of his skills as a good parent, do a lot of descriptive praise and not say, wow, this is awesome. And to say, look at how you made sure to put the gold exactly where the gold was supposed to go and the beams exactly. Wow. How did you think? Right. Like he would do that, a very good job of that, I'm sure. But that's actually not what he does at all. When he wants to commend the Jewish people on what they've done, he gives them a bracha. And he says that Hashem's blessing, Hashem's shechina, his presence should reside amongst your hands and what you've done. And I saw from the Alshich on that parak of Tehillim that the emphasis in this pasuk, V'hinom Hashem Elokeinu aleinu, right? Hashem's presence should be upon us, u'ma'aseh yadenu, and on the work of our hands, konena aleinu, right? And it should be established for us. U'ma'aseh yadenu, and the work of our hands, konenehu, should be established for it. So the Alshich says, what's with all this like hands and everything? He said, this is how you know that what Moshe was telling the Jewish people is it's all about you. The Mishkan is like a nice physical representation. But what really matters here is the fact that you made something for Hashem, that you followed all of the guidelines and the instructions that Hashem gave you. You didn't put any of yourself into this. This was all about, this is what Hashem asked. And so therefore, this is what we're going to do. And that in the long run, as much as we yearn for the day where we will have a physical space that is totally devoted to Hashem and where he'll reveal himself and all of that. But the end goal is not the Beis HaMikdash. Like, I know we all say that, and all of those things for sure. But the end goal is the Jewish people's relationship with Hashem. The end goal is the development of the people and not the development of a building necessarily. And that's the message Moshe is trying to give to the Jewish people. And he says it so beautifully, ha'ikar hu ba'anashim. What matters most are the people. And that fits really perfectly with that idea we spoke about with the mashkon, that it's really at the end of the day, it's beautiful. They did a great, great job, and it continued to get more and more beautiful. With each place that was built, the Mishkan was nice, but like there was more gold and more fancy things in the first Beis HaMikdash. And the second Beis HaMikdash, when Herod redid it, was with way more material and much more, luxurious and fancy looking. But none of that matters. What mattered was that it was a mashkon. It was a way that Hashem would say, no matter what you guys do, I'll take out my anger on this and never on you, God forbid, because it's all about the relationship. And that's the bracha that Hashem gives the Jewish people, that ha'ikar hu ba'anashim, that it's not about the Mishkan, it's about the people. And I think really you could see that he's like proud of them. Like, he can't believe, they've made a few mistakes at this point. So now oh, you guys really did a good job. This was well done. And it's not so much that what you did was good, it's that you're good, that you were able to produce something like this. And I think that is really a beautiful way to end Sefer Shmos, to end this Parsha and end our little 5-week stint all focused on the Mishkan, with a bracha for Moshe that he should bless everything that we do with our hands. I think, was it last week that we spoke about the concept of hands in general? I think we did. Yes, but the tavu hanashim, that the women were weaving, and it talked about also with their hands. And we mentioned last week how the Eshes Chayil also, it's constantly busy. It's like constantly with the hands. And I thought that actually fit in so beautifully with the idea that Hashem should bless Ma'aseh Yadenu. Everything we do, God willing, should be successful and the way that Hashem wants it. But most importantly, it should be that we're doing things that Hashem wants from us, and not so much the end product, but the process itself. So have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. Thanks for learning today. It was great to see you in person and on Zoom. Have a great Shabbos. Thank you.
Thank you, Rifki.